Blue Troopers, and after all that effort and everything, I still managed to miss one of the B-25s. The photos had been sent to me, and they were called uh, .heic files. I don't know what that means, but they weren't JPEGs or PNGs or something. Basically, my computer couldn't digest them, so they didn't come through on the email. Then, after I was told by the viewer that I had missed his airplane, I went back, used his name, found pictures, like, well, there's nothing here. Started clicking buttons and mashing things, and sure enough, one of them popped up. And then I realized there was a way to open them and convert them to PNGs or JPEGs. So my apologies for missing your airplane. Technology. It's a double-edged sword. Oh, my brother had mentioned in the comment section that one of my dad's best friends was a B-25 pilot. And I had probably mentioned it in passing. Of course, he's sadly passed away now. It was John Cody. And he had been what was called a flying sergeant. And there was something kind of interesting about that because he was temporarily a second lieutenant. And what he told us was that during World War II, when he went in the service like so many other brave young men, they screened him, and he was, by the way, right here in Jacksonville, Florida. And he told me that they had, basically, it was a flight screening program, and what they did was, since they were going to flight school, all of them got bumped up to Buck Sergeant E5, three striper, while they were in training. So okay, well that's nice. And as an aside, when I had originally applied for warrant officer flight training, as a warrant officer candidate who wore the little WOC on your hat, you got the Buck Sergeant pay, the E5 pay, unless you were already a pay grade above that. They just figured your rank was a sort of nebulous thing, so they had to give you something. And well, anyway, he was in it. They made them all Buck Sergeants. They soloed in, he said it was basically an Aeronautica Champ. And then, and this was not the civilian training program that the civilian pilot training program that had existed before the war. It may have been done by the same people, but they were all in the military at this point. And it was just today we call it the flight screening program. They just want to see if they could teach you to fly. Then they went off and primary and basic, and he actually ended up in B-24 Liberators as a co-pilot. And he said they picked one up brand new at the factory in Ypsilanti, where they spent a couple of days. And it was an amazing thing to sit there, like every hour or so, watch a brand shiny new B-24 roll out of that factory. He was a manufacturing guy, and he was always very impressed with that facility. Well, anyway, so he comes down, he flies the thing down to Keesler, and then they come in one day, and the B-24 is kind of a handful airplane, and they basically just said, look, we need some people to fly medium bombers. Anybody interested? And so, that sounds interesting, and he volunteered. So they briefed the guys, and he and this captain or pilot in command go out to B-25 pre-flight, and they're in the cockpit. And the way the story goes is that guy looks at him and goes, "You ever flown a B-25?" He goes, "No." "Have you ever flown a B-25?" And he goes, "No, but we can figure it out. Airplane's an airplane." And they sort of checked each other out. It was the 40s. He was doing mostly anti-submarine patrol off the U.S. coast, and a lot of them wanted to go, get into the action. But we'd actually trained so many pilots and built so many airplanes that they were actually having, little trouble getting people overseas. It was like, look, we got plenty of equipment now, plenty of aircraft. That's not the problem, but we still got to patrol our coastline. And so that's where he spent the war. Well, what had happened was, apparently after he had graduated flight school, they penned him as lieutenants, but they told him this is temporary rank. Basically, you're really a sergeant. But you're a pilot, so it's temporary. And they did have some actual flying sergeants that actually maintained the enlisted grades when they flew. But in this case, they did pen second lieutenant on them with the clear understanding that this is temporary rank. And I remember seeing something on YouTube on an old news report from the 60s when the last Air Force flying sergeant retired. And he was a master sergeant or chief master sergeant. And he was flying a C-47. And then I hear the door creaking. I think Princess is entering the room. So, oh, there you are. Come here, sweetie. Come on. Everybody wants to see you. Yes, everybody wants to see you. You're a bigger star than him. Come on. Come. You want me to pick you up? Oh, there you go. There she is. Yeah, say hey, baby. Whee. I'm sorry, I'm in your house. Is it okay? Can I continue? So, ladies and gentlemen, the diva of the house. Oh, she's on guard duty, looking for the mouse in the house. A very Tom and Jerry episode. So, anyway, in light of our recent B-25 builds, I just thought I would tell that little story of our family friend, the B-25 pilot, out of, I believe it was Greenville Army Airfield. And so now, guys, that we have finished the V-25 build, now that I've finally hopefully gotten the last straggler back in formation, I want to talk about the Cold War build. So I'm already working on the Terra Cruiser and the Mace, as you know. I'm slowing down. I'm going to slow my roll on that. And it's going to be nice. I can already tell. I just have a vibe about this one. You ever get a vibe about a model just start going together? This is going to be good. I just know this is going to be a good one. So that's where I am with that. I have a couple of others that I might work on through a trade with somebody. I just acquired a WAC Corporal, and I've also got the V2 I pointed out the other day. And if they'll go together without too much argument, I'll build them. And I'm temporarily planning to put the V2 in test markings. But, you know, it kind of brings up an interesting question about the V2. Is it a Cold War missile? Well, kind of yes and kind of no. Stay with me here. It is definitely a World War II weapon system because it was used in World War II. But that technology, along with world politics, helped kick off the Cold War, and V2s were tested, and the American copies, or you know, the ones we took out to New Mexico and everything, and shot all over the place. And I do mean all over the place. We've landed at least one of them in Mexico. Oops, apologies, Mexico. It was an accident, but I would say it counts as not only a Cold War missile because it jumps World War II and the Cold War, but one could argue that it's the original Cold War missile. And, but of course, being that the Cold War missile build is specifying the Cold War, I want to put it in the markings of like the post-war tests and everything. I have to see if I can find some decals for it. But the nice thing about the internet, plenty of resource photos floating around. And one of the things that I find kind of interesting is I always felt that if I couldn't find a resource photo, but I could find a museum that had an artifact, well, that'd be a great way to get some, you know, unquestionably accurate information. And then I'm down at the Rocket Center at the Cape, and I'm looking at the Titan and a couple of other things and going, something about that just, I don't know what it is. I mean, it looks right, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Well, then one day I'm at a place called Guard Lee, which is near Apopka, Florida, and it's a place that makes space artifacts for like museums and stuff, like replicas, and they also rebuild original space hardware for museum display, amongst other things. And the fellow there is extremely knowledgeable, and he told me about, some of the shortcuts museums have to take sometimes because they can't actually get the complete accurate artifact. One of them was the Titan. He said, yeah, that thing, and apparently the versions of first and second stage and a few other things they just cobbled together to make it look like a Titan, and they are Titan components, but it's not actually accurate. I was like, I mean, 99.99% of people there aren't going to catch that. So just because you went to a museum, even if you're looking at the original artifact, well, sometimes you go, hey, this is the plane or the car that so-and-so did. Then you find out, but it's been rebuilt 3 times, and that was removed, and this was removed. And so Uh, for example, the Dragula from the Munsters. Well, the fiberglass casting that made the coffin body. Well, they've made several of those things since then. So, you know, I don't know, and I don't know how accurate each one is, but you realize, oh, okay, so maybe, just maybe, it's the model I'm building isn't quite as accurate as I hoped, and that goes for vintage aircraft that are on display because often they had to be rebuilt, and they may have had to use more modern turnbuckles, or just not, a lot of the stuff nothing you ever noticed building a model, but sometimes they've had to replace entire components. I forget where it was, but I remember looking at one of them and like something didn't look right. I forget, it was a fin on a rocket or a tailpiece on an airplane. I think it was a fin on a rocket. So I guess, oh yeah, we cut that out of plywood that was missing one. Okay. I mean, you couldn't tell from a distance, but um, nice thing about Huntsville is you'll be driving down the road in Alabama because they have Huntsville there, or in Central Florida down near the Cape, and you'll see a rocket on the side of the road standing up because it's some old piece of hardware that somebody cobbled together and put on display. It's like, hey, right just south here in Jacksonville, they got I think it's an early model M60 tank. I was driving by, it was like a VFW. It was just a tank parked out front. And why I haven't gone and played on that, I don't know. But, well, if you guys ever watched The Chieftain's Hatch, Nick Moran, a lot of times he'll get in these museum vehicles, talk about how this or this has been changed, and that's not the way it was when it was tested or when it was in military service, and but just limitations on museums. So all I'm saying is when you're using images online or going to a museum to detail your model to make it more accurate, don't get disappointed if it comes up a little bit short from time to time. Not the end of the world. I mean, kind of the ultimate first world problem, right? Those are the problems to have. Well, guys, take care of yourselves. And as always, model on.